Welcome back, everyone. It's just another day in the life as a military wife. And as I explained last week, this month is going to be a little different than normal. We're going to be doing profiles of veterans. And basically, it's why they served, when they served, what they did while in the military, and what they've done since. And I have really enjoyed the process of interviewing these different veterans. They all have different backgrounds and experiences and reasons why they joined and also they've all end up in very different places. And I think there's a lot that can be learned about what the kind of caliber of people who serve in our armed forces, and also the pros and cons, ups and downs, and just variety of post-military life experiences. So, as always, I am your host, Sam Wolf, and you're listening to Life of a Military Wife. First up, veteran being interviewed is John Denny, and I'm going to let him explain when he got in, why he got in, what he did, all his reasonings and motivation, what branch he was in, and all that stuff. So, John, take it away.
Okay. So I was a 15 uniform, which is a Chinook helicopter mechanic, and I served from technically September 12th, 2011, because they wouldn't let my entry date be September 11th, which I was like, there's a reason, but they said no to that. And then I got out in October of 2016. So I did maintenance on the helicopter for the first 4-ish years of my career. And then the last 5, I was part of the flight company and a flight engineer.
Okay. And we've had this conversation previously because we've known each other previously. What was the reason? Why did you feel motivated or the desire to serve in the military?
Okay, so it's actually twofold. One, I was there in New Jersey across the Hudson, and I watched the towers fall. So that always resonated with me that, hey, we were attacked and I love my country and I need to do something. Now, after I was done with my mission, it took me a couple of years, but I was sitting down and I was like, here's all of these other people that are putting their life on the line for me. And I feel like I was a capable adult at that time, and I didn't need somebody else to do that for me. So I raised my right hand and I put my money where my mouth is, so to say, and I joined the Army. So that's the September 11th definitely was a big influence and decision in that, but it was also that I love my fellow humans and they're doing something for me that I can do for myself. And I don't like relying on other people for that. So I felt that urge to step up and step forward.
Yeah. When you were getting in at that point in the military, did you feel like there was a lot of other service members going in at the same time for similar reasons?
In my basic group, not so much because they were all younger. I was 27 when I enlisted. So they were kind of in that 10 to 12-year-old range when September 11th happened. So they were still fairly young, and I don't think that that was necessarily a motivating driver for them, but they had seen the progress of the war and they were like, I too can't sit idly by the sidelines and just let this continue without helping.
Yeah, so they felt like they needed to contribute.
Yep.
Yeah. And I've mentioned this previously. I feel like when we got in, because we got in a while after you guys, there was this sense of everyone was in kind of for a reason. We all had seen there was still a unified goal. The military still had a clear goal objective, and I feel like we're starting to lose that. But in your experience when you were in the military, just kind of give everyone a brief example of deployment separation. Like, what was your general experience like?
Well, the first deployment was actually a pretty easy one. It was out of Alaska here, and that was in September of 2010. And that was a humanitarian aid mission to Pakistan. It had rained like 11 or 12 inches in 24 hours and flooded out most of the country. So that one kind of opened our eyes to what a deployment was like without constantly being under fire or doing missions that were fire missions or things like that. And you're working a 12-hour shift, you're doing your maintenance, and everything was, the op tempo was a lot faster than in garrison. So it was kind of a rude awakening, because for the previous 2 years here, when we would do maintenance on a helicopter, we would do our phases and they would take 4-6 weeks. And now here we are being deployed, and we're turning these things in 3, 5, and 7 days, just one right after the other, because you're flying so much that you have to do those inspections, and just because the op tempo was so fast. So that was a good little introduction. It was only 3.5 months. It wasn't very long away from the family. Everything was kind of already established when we got in. So we had facilities, everything was set up. We didn't have to do much other than show up and go to work. Okay. Whereas being deployed in a combat zone, you're taking fire, IDF, sometimes being on a Zoom call, not necessarily Zoom because it wasn't around then, but being on a video call with your spouse, and here comes some IDF and the sirens go off and you're like, hey, honey, I love you, but I got to go. And you got to cut the call off and run to the bunker. And that definitely takes a toll on family life. And because now my wife or any other spouse is sitting there wondering what the heck's going on, and am I going to hear from them again? So that definitely, that psychological and that emotional state has its toll and bearing on a family.
Yeah. I remember when we were getting ready for some of our first separations and stuff, that's when we knew you guys and was picking your brains on how's the best way to keep in contact, because everything was just shifting. At the very beginning, it was really hard. You had to wait for those satellite phones. You had to like wait in lines. You had to have turns. It was all very, it was a lot more difficult, but the technology, it just exploded. And then all of a sudden there was options. People had more versatility in communication, and you guys were helping us navigate that. And I was so grateful for that. Um, and I feel like that is something that modern, like right now, military spouses have, and they don't really understand what you guys went through at the beginning, like during the beginning.
Yep, definitely. Things have changed over the last couple decades, and there were several times I talked to people like, "Can you imagine World War II or Vietnam being Facebook Live? Like, it would have been a completely different war." And just that instant communication, I think, also plays a role in the political side of things, because the flow of information is so quick that there's less that the government can get away with per se. And that information flow means we also have to react faster. We don't have time to sit down and plan the perfect mission. You just have to plan a mission that's going to work.
Yeah. And sadly, that also means that there's a lot of criticism. I feel like that's really what happened in Vietnam, is that it was when that information switch was starting to happen. And so people started forming really like critical opinions. And we even saw that with the situation in Iraq and Afghanistan. Originally, it felt like people were behind the military, And then over time, it felt like there was less and less support. And that really did take a toll on morale, at least in my opinion.
Yep, I can agree with that. And I think that part of that culturally is just with it being so constant. You know, when you initially touch a hot stove, your reaction is, oh crap, that's hot. But like the frog in the boiling water, we got exposed to it and it was like, okay, well, we can do this. And then we just got used to it and it became mundane and an everyday thing. So then we kind of just lost that focus as a society.
Yeah. So when did you separate from the military? And if you're comfortable with explaining why you guys did that and made that choice for your family, and then what you're doing now.
Okay. So I left the Army in October of 2016, and it was just the end of my second contract. I decided that it wasn't worth going forward. If I were to hit that 10 years in that hump, then I knew that I would want to stay 20. And just physically, the Army had already broken me. I was tired of being told that my inability to do certain aspects of my job was just because of my weight. And at that time, I was 5'9", 220, a lot fitter than I am now. But then I have the option of surgery on my feet or just dealing with bad feet. So we decided to get out, that continuing wouldn't be advantageous to either my health, physically or mentally. And I was just kind of done with the whole concept of the Army, all the politics, the BS, so to speak. I just wanted to do my job, which was fix helicopters. And there was too much other stuff at play that in garrison prevented a lot of us from doing that. So after I got out, I stayed in aviation. I got my airframe and power plant license. And I started initially, I contracted with Lockheed Martin there on post for a year and did post phase test flights on the 160th aircraft. And then I moved back up to Alaska because Alaska is home for my wife, home for my kids. And I just missed it. It is way better than Kentucky. So I got a job at the airport with a 121 cargo carrier, Everett's Air. I started out as a maintenance planner, so I would prepare the check packages for the planes, submit them to the contractor who was going to perform those maintenance items, and then make sure that all of the tasks were completed and help with those records process. While I was there, then became maintenance control and maintenance control supervisor, where I ran the planning department and maintenance control, communicated with the ops about what planes were available, how long they were going to be down, what was broken, what was available, so that they could manage their flight schedule and make sure that operations continue. After I left there, I did a little bit of general support maintenance for Alaska Airlines, and currently I am out at Fort Knox Gold Mine driving trucks.
Okay, that's cool. So the training you got, was that part of your separation from the military? Did they help at all with that transition?
Yeah, absolutely. I was able to use my tuition assistance for the class, the accelerated class, to get my AMP. And then I used some of my VA GI Bill benefits to pay for the testing to get my license. So a lot of people, when they exit the military for aviation, don't get their license, because when you're contracting for Lockheed or Dynaco or AECOM or any of these conglomerates that are on post, you don't need that license because your schoolhouse training from the Army is sufficient. But I knew that I wanted to have that as a backup, so that if I ever did leave a job on post and I wasn't a government contractor, I could work on aircraft in the civilian sector. So the Army did help pay for that. Right before I got out, I was able to take care of that and have that as a backup. And it ended up being the first place that I ended up going working and utilizing that license.
Yeah, so those I feel like there's a lot of people who don't always realize that those options are available, or what options are available for what they do in the Army, or that they can even get certifications away from their MOS as they're separating from the military service. So I think it's good, and it's important for, as we're highlighting veterans right this month, pointing out that please utilize those options, utilize those things that you've got. The other thing I kind of wanted to just ask you about in general is, now as a veteran, um, what is it like navigating the space of the VA? Are you having what are the you
Do we have
when
enough time for this topic?
okay, let's narrow it down a little bit. The military never leaves you. People think that the military is like any other job. When you're done, you're done. It doesn't. The effects of the military stick with you, and they still affect your family. They'll still affect you. They still shaped who you are. And you still have to deal with the government. It's like a bad marriage. You never get out of it.
Yep.
So
So,
what would you want to share along that lines?
so for me personally, my VA experience is probably one of the better ones. When I left the Army, Fort Campbell, the VA there was not the best. They denied several of my claims, saying that there was no record, even though I'm looking at the title sheet, the table of contents of my medical records, and I'm like, it's item number 5. What do you mean there's no record? There's 200 pages here that talk about it. So a lot of people have to deal with that aspect of the VA just being completely oblivious. In the end, I ended up getting basically everything that I wanted. And in the end, there was some errors, and I was able to get the VSO, yep, the Veteran Service Organization, to write a letter, because there was some stuff that it's like, how could you make this error? Like, this is blatantly obvious. And one of it was, one claim had the current date, and one claim had the date of service when I left the service, which they both should have, because I filed the intent to claim within that first year, which would have backdated it to my release date. And then they came back with 2 different effective dates. And it's like, that's not how this works. But for the most part, here in Alaska, the VA has done a really good job. My primary care provider has done a very good job. When I've gone to the ER for issues, I usually get a call 2-3 days later from either my primary care physician or a nurse or my PA. Before this, I was talking to my PA because I've got some issues right now reordering CPAP supplies. I'm out and went online, and there's no file in my VA file for my service connected sleep apnea. So I can't reorder supplies online. So there are still some issues, but I called them on Tuesday. Here it is Thursday, and they're calling back and handling it. And just yesterday, I went down to the clinic. I was doing some work on my car this weekend. I scraped up my arm a little bit. I didn't think that I had really broken the skin, but on what was yesterday, Wednesday, it was infected. So I had broken the skin. It got infected. I cleaned it, cleared it out. But I was like, oh, when was the last time I had a tetanus shot? Because it was up against metal. So I went in yesterday morning. I said, hey, look, this is what happened. This is where I'm at. Can I get a tetanus booster and or check to see when the last one is? And within 30 minutes, I was in and out, and they gave me a new Tdap. So my experience isn't what others have, and I'm glad that it hasn't been. And I'm empathetic to those that do have that struggle with the VA system, because it is a constant fight with literally everything. But for the most part, here in Alaska, I think that I've actually had a positive VA experience.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Um, just if anybody's on the fence about joining and you don't know what you want to do, pick an MOS that's going to translate into something on the civilian side. You're going to give your body, your soul, your mentality to the Army or the Air Force or Navy Marines, then make them pay for you to learn a useful skill. That would be my best advice. So that way, when you come out, you've got something that you can fall back on, that you have that experience already.
Yeah. So MOS, for most of my listeners will know, but MOS is just basically the job. It's the Army's acronym for it, and each branch has a slightly different acronym. But yeah,
Yep.
I really think that's great advice. It's something I think too many kids get in. They're like, I'm going to do infantry, and you're like, yes, but how are you going to use that in the future? Like, unless you really want to be in the military for 20 years doing infantry, then more power to you. We need people like that.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I think it's important, like you said, to know that there's a lot of variety of jobs in the military. And just because you have a job in the military doesn't mean you can't get the military to give you training in another job if you figure out there's something else you'll want to do different when you get out.
Yep. There's definitely a lot of opportunities that at least on the Army, with skilled trades. And when you go through the transition program, I don't know what acronym they're using now. But when I left, I think it was TAP. But there was definitely options, welding, construction, and it just depends on your area. Right now, my wife is doing a Alaska Works program for carpentry, and one of the guys in her class is the current first sergeant of the flight company up here for Chinooks. So there's definitely that opportunity, and he's definitely taking advantage of that, and more power to the people that do that and take advantage of those programs, because that definitely leads to an easier transition back into civilian life, which for me wasn't that hard because I joined when I was 27. So I had that experience first. But if your only experience is military, then that's all you know. And I've seen people struggle to switch that military mentality off. And it's kind of heartbreaking because that's all they know and that's all they have. So take advantage of those so that you can set yourself up for success later.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for being willing to do this episode. I really just want to thank you for your service. Thank you for all your family did for our family when we were getting in and still figuring out what the crap we'd got ourselves into and how we were going to navigate this crazy military world. So thank you for all you've done for our family. Thank you for all you've done for our country. And yeah, just thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, most definitely. Thanks for thinking of me and having me on. And I appreciate the time and opportunity to share what I had been through and my story.
That wraps up our first profile of a veteran for this month. I want to thank John again for taking time out of his schedule to come share his story and what he's doing now. If you'd like to check him out on social media, you can find him at Alaskan Bull 3T Point, and that'll be in the description below. I hope you all are doing well. And as always, you're listening to Life of a Military Wife, and I'm your host, Sam Wolf.